Hey everyone, it's Carissa Wiley at sprinkledwithglitter.com. Thanks for joining me today. Today I am sharing a fun and colorful holiday project that features brand new products from Hero Arts, and I am going to show you how to use press plates with a registration guide. Before we jump into it, I wanted to show you a look at some of the brand new products available from Hero Arts for their August 2025 release, including this Fa La La Betterpress plate set. Now you see here the registration guide. This gives us an outline to help us line up all of those little press plates in the way that they were intended. And I'm going to show you how to use this today to create a multi-color design with your press plates. I'll also be incorporating the brand new Modern Holiday Greetings stamp set. This is so much fun. There is a coordinating die set available, which always sells me. And finally, I have a couple of die sets, and I just wanted to note that all of these products are listed in the YouTube description below. So let's start out by taking a look at our Betterpress itself. Now, the Betterpress is comprised of two different parts. This is the Platen here, that clear plastic plate, and this is the chase. Now, the chase has a couple of elements to it. First is this magnetic mat, and under the magnetic mat, there are 3 mylar shims. Now, these can be used to adjust the depth that you get when you do letterpress or faux letterpress with the Betterpress. I'm keeping all 3 of those in my Betterpress platform today. Now you can see that this magnetic shim or magnetic mat tends to shift around a little bit in there, and that's actually so that you can remove it to get to those shims beneath it. What I like to do is position it towards the bottom, line it up in the middle, and then hold it in place with some painter's tape. This is some satin masking tape. You could also use the Best Ever Craft tape. That's going to take some of the wiggle out so that if I need to repress something, I don't have to worry about that moving. Now, in order to use the registration guide, I'm going to line it up in the center of this magnetic mat. There's an A2 guide right there in the center. So the outline of the A2 that's on the registration guide, I'm going to line that up with the A2 guide on the center of this magnetic mat. Now, one thing you want to keep in mind is when you're positioning this, that you have the lettering where you can actually read it. So on that bottom right-hand corner, you can see that it says Betterpress and it's right side up so I can read it easily. Now I'm going to hold that in place with some Best Ever Craft tape because I'm going to be swapping out my press plates as we move throughout this project, and I don't want that to go anywhere. So you can see it's nice and secure. Now I want to prep my Platen with my cardstock, and for this I'm going to be using the cotton Betterpress panels in Porcelain. I've trimmed this down to an A2 size card, and I'm lining it up with those registration guides that show me an A2 size on the Platen. Then I'm going to take some Best Ever Craft tape and tack that down. Now, I don't want too much of this adhesive overlapping the front side of my card because there is a risk that when I rip this off, because it is a cottony cardstock, that it could rip my cardstock. So I'm just putting a little bit to tack it onto the Platen. These 4 little pieces of tape are not in the way of my design at all, and they're holding that on there securely so that as I run this through, it will stay in the same spot. So now that we have everything prepped, it's time to start our Betterpress process. So I'm going to start out with 2 of the press plates that I want to be in a pink or red color, and I'm lining them up with the guidelines on that registration mark right on that magnetic mat. Now, because these are smaller press plates, they do kind of want to wiggle around. If you have larger press plates, they don't wiggle around as much because that magnet is holding them in place, and it creates more kind of stick with the magnets when the metal plates themselves are a little bit larger. But these are pretty small, and so they do want to wiggle around just a little bit. And I'm going to show you how to get around that here in just a second. I'm inking these up with a small mini ink cube from Concord and Ninth. This is in the color Watermelon, and I'm gently tapping on the surface of the press plate. Now here's the deal. I do find that when I'm using a foam ink pad like the Concord and Ninth, the press plates want to kind of stick to it at times. And so I'm going in with a very light touch with this ink pad. Now, the felt ink pads don't tend to suction to the press plates like a foam one does. So just keep that in mind. If you're using felt, you may not have as much difficulty with this. Now you saw me use my Perfect Picker tool. I actually used that to slide it back into the outlines on the registration guide that's on that magnetic mat before I put my Platen on and ran this through my Platinum 6 die cutting machine. Now I decided I wanted a little more depth and color for this, so I am re-inking the plates, leaving them exactly in place, being very careful that none of those slip around and that I don't accidentally get one suctioned to my ink pad, very light hand, then replacing the Platen and running that back through my die cut machine again, and that presses a second time. It's kind of like double stamping. Now I cleaned up my Betterpress plates as well as that registration guide with a baby wipe and a microfiber cloth, and now it's time to move on to a green color. So I have 2 more plates positioned onto that registration guide. You can see my pad actually just picked up that little tiny press plate. And so I just pressed it back down onto the magnetic mat, and then I will use that Perfect Picker tool again to slide it back into place. Now I'm being very careful to ink these really well on the first go around so that I can avoid having to double press as much as possible. So I'm just making sure that I get everything kind of inked up really well. I'm wiping around those plates with a baby wipe and then running this through my die cut machine with that Platen in place. And you can see I got a beautiful impression of those 2 green lalas. Lalas, I like that. So now it's time to move on to our next green color. So I have 2 more press plates that line up with that registration guide. And this time I'm using Rainforest ink from Concord and Ninth to ink up these press plates. Again, they're wanting to wiggle around. You can see that one moved quite a bit. I'm actually just gonna slide it out of the way with my Perfect Picker tool. I'm gonna wipe up my registration guide here because I had a lot of ink around that. And then I'll just slide them back into place using my Perfect Picker tool. And this is a great use for this tool. Now, I did see another little area on this bottom law that I wanted to re-ink. So again, I'm just going in with a really light tap to try not to move it around, try not to get any ink on that registration guide. Positioned my Platen on the magnetic feet and then ran that through my die cut machine. Now, something I want to point out about the Betterpress system, if you've never used it before, when you place the Platen on those magnetic feet, those are spring loaded. So the paper is not actually touching the cardstock until you run it through the die cut machine. It puts pressure on those feet and presses the press plates into the paper. So you are getting kind of that faux letterpress look where all of these are pressed into the paper. So it's a little different than stamping because it's not just like the colored image on the cardstock. You're getting an impression with this as well. So you can see I positioned some of the sparkles. I inked those up with Tide Pool ink and then placed my Platen on the Betterpress chase, ran that through my die cut machine, and now I have my design completed. I decided I wanted a little sub-greeting on this card, so I have the 'Tis the Season to Sparkle stamp from that Modern Holiday Greeting stamp set, and I'm going to heat emboss this onto some vellum. So I prepped the surface of my vellum using my powder tool, and I'm inking up my stamp using some Versamark ink. Then I'm going to sprinkle it with some Brutus Monroe Sterling embossing powder. However, I end up changing this to the Gilded, which is a gold embossing powder instead at the very end. I don't show you this part of me changing it out, but everything else was the same except for the color. So once I have the powder applied, I tapped off the excess and I heat set that until it was melted. Now I have a beautiful, shiny raised sentiment, and I'm using the coordinating die to die cut that out. Now I will also do a little more die cutting with this gorgeous snowflake here, and I'm using some of the Treasured Cardstock pack. This is the Antique White Treasured Cardstock pack from Spellbinders. It has this beautiful glitter cardstock in it, and look at this delicate snowflake. I absolutely love the way this turned out, and it is super sparkly. So I die cut several of those before moving on. Now I decided I wanted to mat this card. I didn't want this to fill up an entire A2 size card. And could I have cut it down before I did my pressing? Yes. However, it would have been harder to line up with the A2 registration guides that are already on the Platen of the Betterpress system. So instead, I just pressed it out on an A2 size piece of cardstock and then trimmed 1/4 of an inch off of each side on this design. Now I have my sparkly snowflakes here. I'm taking some liquid glue and adding some dots of liquid glue to the back, and I'm going to position them on my card front. Now you're going to notice that I'm doing this along the edge, and part of those snowflakes are hanging off. That's intentional. I'm gonna snip off the excess and use those extra scraps in other areas of the card. So again, I have another snowflake here that I'm adding some liquid glue to the back of, and I'm placing this kind of in that lower left-hand corner side there. Again, allowing that to adhere to this beautiful Betterpress cardstock and then trimming off the excess. Now for the sentiment, I actually snipped apart the 'Tis the Season and the To Sparkle on a layer of glitter cardstock as well as the heat embossed version. And I'm going to add some tape runner adhesive to the back of this and slightly offset this sentiment on the shadow layer and just allow a little bit of that glitter to kind of peek out from behind the vellum. You can see I'm taking my favorite scissors. These are the Spellbinders Pro Shears, Precision Pro Shears. I think they should call them the best ever scissors, but they didn't leave it up to me. I'm trimming off those excess pieces, and then I'm using those pieces on other areas of the card. So you can see adding some liquid glue to the back again and allowing them to hang off the edges and the corners. I added my heat embossed sentiment with the glitter shadow layer with a little bit of foam tape on the front of my card. And I had to go back and cut one more snowflake because I felt like this little area needed to be filled in and I needed a full snowflake for that. So I adhered that and trimmed off the excess. Now I'm adding the entire card front onto an antique ivory card base. This is antique ivory cardstock from Hero Arts. And that finishes off my card today featuring this adorable Fa La La Betterpress plate, which is brand new from Hero Arts. I absolutely love the design of this. And keep in mind, Betterpress plates can be used with your hot foil system as well. However, I will tell you that there is not a way to use that registration guide with your hot foil system. So just keep that in mind. Now, as always, I will have links to the featured products used in this project in the YouTube description below. So if you're looking for something in particular, be sure you check there. You can also find a link to the entire brand new August 2025 release from Hero Arts in that YouTube description. Head on over to my blog for more still shots, information, and a complete list of supplies. And finally, I want to say, leave me a comment below and thank you so much for watching. I'm so glad you're here. I hope you enjoyed this project and I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to give this video a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notifications here so you don't miss any of my paper crafting and card making video tutorials. Thanks again for watching, and until next time, I hope you have a fabulous day.